There's a scene near the end of the third act of Wim Wenders' 2023 film Perfect Days, where the protagonist, Hirayama, has a confrontation with his estranged sister. His sister has arrived to his modest apartment complex in a hired car to pick up her daughter, Hirayama's niece. His sister looks him up and down, gazes at the surrounding environment, and makes a judgment about his worth, his job as a Shibuya public toilet cleaner, and his apparent lack of ambition. Until this moment, Perfect Days has avoided any kind of direct conflict with the way Hirayama has chosen to live his life. The film's simple documentation of his daily routines reveres the beautiful simplicity of this life he has carved out for himself. Perfect Days is not an ironic title. For most of the film, Hirayama's contentment with his life makes each of his small choices appear divine. For the 2 hours you're with him, you're won over by the simplicity and beauty of his life. But the confrontation with his sister bubbles something to the surface for him, a kind of alarm that asks him to rethink the days he's been thinking of as perfect, even if it's just for a brief moment. It's this scene that makes me think about the choices I've made for myself, the contentment I'm always pursuing. Make a list of everything you did today, every small thing, every action, from waking up to merging left to cooking dinner. Now, look over that list and note the items you chose to do out of free will. In the shape of your life, what do you do that actually makes you, you? One of the most insidious aspects of our increasingly busy culture is the blurring of lines between the mandatory and the optional. In the pre-digital age, our office is where work happened because that's where all the work was. As the years count on and our physical spaces become digital, the office has moved away from being a building or a room and into more of a state of mind. Work isn't a place, it's a way of being. If we decentralize the place of work, what does that do to our mental spaces? In Elizabeth S. Anderson's book, Hijacked, How Neoliberalism Turned the Work Ethic Against Workers and How Workers Can Take It Back, she pinpoints one of the core reasons people in the 21st century have record numbers of depression and anxiety, not even taking into account the warming climate, wars raging around the world, the constant political discourses in online and offline spaces, and the nonstop runway of sensationalized news on our many devices. People are struggling to find peace in their lives. And for many, it's not that daily life is harder than it was before. Speaking purely from the perspective of human progress, life is probably easier now than ever before in all of recorded human history. Technological and medical advancements are helping us live longer and more comfortably. Limitless oceans of entertainment rest at our fingertips. We can communicate seamlessly across any distance. With all these incredible advancements, people are more miserable than ever. They're dissatisfied at work, they're stressed at home, and the needs for mental health intervention for the general population are at an all-time high. According to Anderson's book, one of the multitude of reasons for the wave of depression and anxiety among the American workforce is that there's just no such thing as a weekend anymore. Time away from work isn't as simple as leaving your office. Now your office is in your pocket all the time. We're on call perpetually, and that's making us miserable. With productivity influencers and writers taking up airspace with their morning routines and their life hacks, the pressure on contemporary workers to somehow do everything, everywhere, all the time, competing with the thousands of videos of other people seemingly doing it better and faster and more easily than you ever could. Boredom has been replaced with scrolling. Creativity has been siphoned into more potential for profit, and friendships have turned into data points in a half dozen apps on our phones. Oh, you have a hobby? Well, that's a waste of time, unless you make it a side hustle. Oh, you enjoy exercise? Well, you should probably wear this watch that just criticizes and documents your every move. Oh, you read books. Think of the hours of productivity you're losing. Just let our AI chatbot reduce them to short paragraphs you can listen to on your daily commute. For these productivity apps, systems, influencers, and the millions who engage in this content, including me, Free time has become a consequence of laziness, not a goal in and of itself. Why waste hours doing something that makes you happy? You should take a course on finance and make the most of each hour. The vicious cycle of modern productivity dictates that we spend every moment investing in some nebulous future, working ourselves to death to hit the apex of our profession, retire early, buy a boat, and live untouched by mediocrity and mundanity. But we weren't designed for this way of life, and work isn't something that always defined us. For thousands of years, work was just farming enough to eat your fill. Work was building a home in which you were safe from the elements. Work was something you did to increase the value of not work. So what's the use of all this productivity if it just makes us busier? I used to work for a large data entry company. The hours were firm, the management was micro, and at its worst, our productivity was counted using a built-in app on our company computers. Each day, we would receive a huge stack of files, and the days were spent entering the data into spreadsheets and forms. At some point, a few months into my work there was this widget that was introduced, and it removed about 50% of the workload from the task of actually inputting the data. We went from being able to enter about 30 files per hour to around 50. The company goal when I started was 20 files per hour per employee, and the actual contract stipulated each employee only needed to input 10 files per hour. After the widget was introduced, the company was inputting data at a volume 5 times higher than required by our actual contract. These extra files were done in a fraction of the time, and they brought in no extra money. There were no bonuses or extra funds brought into the company by this dramatic increase in productivity. The hours never changed for the remaining employees either, not even the salaried workers, but many were laid off. The app that tracked us became more strict. The expectation was now to process 40 files per hour instead of the first 20. The company never reworked employment in any way, despite the huge advantage this new system created. I think about that a lot. Imagine that you build a water line that moves water from your well to your kitchen, removing the necessity of going outside with a bucket, retrieving water, and coming back inside to fill a large pot. You can now just fill the pot with water. Now imagine that instead of capitalizing on that saved time and energy and using that newfound speed for leisure or non-work activities, that you just took the same amount of time to do it and filled 5 pots of water. You don't need 5 pots of water. 5 pots of water is more water than you could even use, but getting water has always taken that long. And that's how long getting water should always take. In my old data entry job, there's a world where the CEO reduced every employee's workday by 80%, paid them all the same wage as before without laying anybody off, and still profited by closing the facilities at 11 a.m. instead of 6 p.m. The contract would have been totally unchanged. The workers would have been happier and healthier, and the world would have just kept spinning. Technology has created an environment where most of the work we do throughout the day can be completed in around 2 hours. But because work is historically about 8 hours a day, that's how long we have to stay in the office. Why? Because according to a generation of managers, time is money. When you're paid to do labor, that labor, one supposes, should be exemplified by how long it took to accomplish. But time isn't money. Here's an apocryphal story attributed to several different artists throughout the 20th century, but usually to Pablo Picasso. At around 50 years old, Picasso sat down at a cafe to enjoy some espresso. A young woman approaches him, recognizes him, and they ask him to draw a small picture on a cocktail napkin. Picasso smiles and obliges. He scribbles something in a couple of minutes, signs it, Pablo Picasso, and hands it back to her. "That'll be $10,000, Picasso says. The woman says, "Well, that's outrageous, Mr. Picasso. Well, it only took you a couple of minutes to make this drawing." "No," Picasso says, "it took me 50 years and a couple of minutes." The amount of time something takes doesn't denote its value. Time is not money. Time is time. Perfect Days is my favorite film of the decade so far, and it's not even close. With minimal dialogue, simple framing and editing, and almost no conflict of any kind, Wim Wenders has made a film strongly rebuking the expectations of contemporary life. For Hirayama, Every day is routine. He wakes up, trims his mustache, waters his plants, gets coffee from the vending machine outside of his apartment, listens to one of his cassette tapes on the way to work, meticulously cleans each public toilet of Shibuya, eats his lunch in a park, goes to a public bathhouse, eats dinner at a noodle shop inside a train station, and reads on his floor until he falls asleep. Perfect Days follows Hirayama through a week of his routine, with minimal variations throughout. On one day, his car breaks down. On another, his niece comes to visit. On another, his partner quits, forcing him to work a double shift. It's not that Hirayama's life is without problems or frustrations or setbacks. Every day provides a new issue for him to resolve. His life isn't perfect because there's no friction between himself and the world or himself and his goals. His days are perfect because he values his own time, and the choices he makes reflect the life he actually wants. While each day comes with some kind of conflict or frustration, Hirayama's mood rarely changes. Throughout the film, we learn small details about Hirayama. We learn he comes from a wealthy family, that he has experienced significant loss. He isn't a perfect person, nor is his life ideal, but the film is called Perfect Days, and when you watch the film, you kind of fall under its spell. Over the course of its 2-hour runtime, you do convince yourself that maybe your life would be perfect too if only you cleaned public toilets in Shibuya. If you too lived in a minimally furnished apartment and read yourself to sleep. And then of course it hits you. Or at least it hit me. I can do all of this now. I can read myself to sleep tonight. I can follow a routine that brings me joy today. I too can look at the sky when I leave my house. I don't have to be wealthy to lead a rich life. Perfect Days reminds me that most of our waking lives are spent inundated with advertising. Our social media apps, our TikTok and YouTube algorithms, our evenings of doom scrolling are meant to tell us the ways in which our lives are letting us down, and the many solutions we can buy or subscribe to in order to fix them. Perfect Days reminds you that your time will never be valued for you. You have to value it for yourself. So what is your time worth? Thank you for watching.